Boom, boom, boom. There it is. 3 of the most attractive men you've ever laid eyes on.
I don't know about that.
You're not feeling sexy today, Chad? What's wrong?
No. Oh, my God. I've had my head through the grinder the last week and a half with this apparel stuff. I'll tell you what.
We're going to talk about that a little bit. Dr. Dave, how are you, buddy?
Oh, doing well.
We're going to have a conversation today about fathers, dads, especially as it relates to the veteran community. We're on the heels of Veterans Day, of Father's Day, which just wrapped up a couple of days ago. What did you all do for your Father's Day, Dr. Dave? What did you do?
Home alone.
What?
Yeah, can you believe that? My wife went to New York to visit family and took the kids. So, but we're going to celebrate Father's Day when she gets back. We did a little brief thing before she left. I
do know one thing, and that one thing is you wouldn't go see your family on Mother's Day. All right, Chad.
I was going to say, that sounds like a fantastic Father's Day. Home alone?
I would agree with that. Watching golf, hanging out, driving around in his new 4-wheel drive with all his new tricks.
Yeah. No, we didn't do a whole lot. We did get together with the family and went and did some bowling and stuff. Then everybody had dinner back at the in-laws' house and hung out.
How's your bowling game, by the way?
Garbage.
Really?
It's garbage. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Dave, what about you?
I haven't been bowling in decades.
Oh.
I don't think I've ever been bowling in Arizona, and I've been out here for 23 years.
Is that the truth?
Yeah.
Well,
what do you got against the ball and pins?
Nothing. I used to be on a bowling league when I was 7 years old.
Yeah, dude, me too. I grew up with a bowling alley. That's why whenever people talk about going bowling, I always key in. I like it.
Sounds like a fundraiser eventually, huh?
Hey, listen, I'm here for it. I will bowl all day long, all night long. I love the bowling. Did you get over 100?
I did. I got over 100. So I'll take that home with me and smile. But yeah, it was fun. It was good to see the little guys. It was Colin's very first time. So he's got that whole bumpers down the lanes and he's got that little mountain. He can push it down and it shoots out. So yeah, it was just fun watching the kids get crazy with it. So.
That's awesome. I love that. Well, we can dive in a little bit here today. Last week, we talked a lot about accountability buddies. And Chad, you had something maybe that you were thinking about after last week's episode that you wanted to talk about here today.
Just it's one of those things, like, I think you just need to have it. I had kind of a rough week with all the apparel and stuff that was going on and going sideways. And I've got probably about 15 orders that I got to get out. But, 15 orders is great, but I got to have the product. And here I am waiting on a company to help me out with that. We're not getting there. So in true military fashion, kind of adapt and overcome. We kind of pivoted a little bit, got what we needed to for apparel, and I'll be working on apparel and doing that this weekend to get these orders out. But, what was nice about it is the accountability buddy or battle buddy or however we want to term these, my guy, he had a shit week too. So it was just kind of nice. We touched base real quick and it was so interesting how similar our weeks were. Like nothing for him lined up at work and this went on. So then now it turned into a joke. I'm like, oh shit, are we in a full moon status? Is Mercury, is Mercury in the water? Yeah, exactly. What the hell's going on? So, I guess my point is like, don't worry about trying to make it so damn formal. Right. Just have a buddy that you're close with that you can check in on a weekly basis. And you'd be surprised at how many other people are having a bad day or a bad week. And just hearing their stuff and what they've gone through might slow you down a little bit and just, turn into a laugh and a giggle as opposed to, God damn, we're all struggling out here in some sort or some way or another, So
that's
it was
a good
just
point.
Kind of retouch on that.
Yeah, Dave, I would love to ask you a question. Like, with accountability buddies, you got a chance that you're going to potentially match yourself up with a know-it-all. And then there's other people who are like, yeah, man, I hear you. Me too. Right. Both seem like they might have some strengths, but speak to that a little bit.
Well, I just wanted to comment on something with what Chad just said. Having somebody outside the family to vent to kind of keeps the negativity out of your family, which is really useful. So if you have an accountability buddy that you can gripe to, and then the intent is find a solution, or to, once you get it off your chest and kind of release that pressure, then sit down and start to problem solve. It's good to take that outside of the family instead of keeping that in the family, and then the negativity can tend to ferment and cause problems in the relationships.
Yeah, that's a great point. I was just looking down at something else as you were explaining that situation, and I wanted to let people know that while we are live here, if there are comments or questions or things that you're thinking about, we certainly don't want to be exclusive talking heads here all afternoon. If there's something you're thinking about, something you'd love to tee up for us to talk about, we're here for kind of all of it. And then another reminder that, we've got Mental Joe and his apparel and all these things that he's waiting on. I know you're waiting on shirts, you're waiting on product, but it doesn't mean people can order this stuff. And it puts us in a position to tackle one of the things that we want to at the end of the summer, which is to throw a little Veterans 3-week project mindset. I don't know if that's what we're going to call it, but it could be a working title. But, just bringing people in, bringing vets in specifically to work through some modalities that potentially they haven't considered before. One of the things that I wanted to talk a little bit about today was something that came up in an earlier conversation I had this morning, which is, where does the value of traditional therapies end? And what is the beginning point then of, I need to try something different? Because, there is a lot of different stuff out there. There's 100 different modalities and treatments and mannerisms of which people could get their hands around you. So, Dave, maybe you could speak to that from kind of your perspective as the doctor, the psychiatrist, and then Chad, you might unfold from your experience as the vet who was trying to sort it out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think your first stop is to use the resources that you have even before you take a look at professional help. So, having a friend to run things by, using the support of family, because there's a lot that can be done just within the resources that you have. And then if you're open to getting the feedback from other people in your family, if a spouse or somebody close to you says, what you're doing right now just isn't working, we need to take a look at other means, maybe get some additional help, maybe get a fresh perspective on it, then I think you start looking outside. And even before you do professional help from a psychiatrist or therapist, maybe take a look at somebody from your church, clergy, take a look at that option first, even before doing professional therapy.
Sadly, for me, it was rock bottom before I sought out. Right. And again, I think that's where the passion of why I want to bring non-traditional modalities to the forefront a little bit more via our apparel, right? And raise awareness, build a community that way. There's more and more people are getting more comfortable with the non-traditionals. And I always say the non-traditionals because it means so many different things. But for me, it is the psychedelics. It is the ketamine. It is the psilocybin. There's a Netflix special that's come out with Michael Pollan. And I believe it's called Change Your Mind, or How to Change Your Mind. And it's going to be, I think, July 12th it comes up. And so there's just really good information that's surrounding these from Harvard, from Stanford, from Johns Hopkins that are doing studies on this stuff. So I think the more people realize that there is some non-traditional sensical type of mental health modalities out there to help folks, I think documentaries like Netflix and, hopefully our apparel one day is a big advocate for that kind of stuff, that people look at it before they hit the rock bottom like I did.
What do you think it is, Dr. Dave, that would make some doctors apprehensive about, psychedelics or trying something that somebody hasn't necessarily considered in the past? Is it probably as simple as, well, it's not going to work for everybody. It's not that kind of a thing.
Yeah. I'm not entirely on board with the psychedelics yet. I just don't think that there's enough information to run to it, certainly as a first line. But it's still early in the research of it. And I think, from my training, there's certainly a bit of stigma around using things that were previously considered illegal drugs, and then trying to find a therapeutic way of using them. It's a bit of a mental hurdle to overcome.
Yeah, just from your own training and all of the things that you've been told. And then now people are coming out going, no, maybe we were wrong. Some of this stuff is actually working for people. And that's the part that you have to kind of get a handle on.
Yeah, even cannabis, among my peers, it's very divided. I mean, a good friend of mine is a huge cannabis advocate as a physician. And you probably even know who she is if you've looked around locally. She's at all the conferences, and but there's a lot of people that are very strongly against it of my peers. I've seen some people do really well with it. I've seen younger people do more harm than good. So if you're in your 20s. And you're using cannabis for anxiety, for sleep, then I get complaints about the cognitive interference. I can't focus on anything. I can't get my work done. I don't have any motivation to do things. And then a lot of times then the conversation turns to, well, can you give me a prescription for Adderall? How about we back off on the cannabis, which is probably slowing you down, before we start adding yet another controlled substance to try to get a handle on it. But then on the flip side, I can think of a Vietnam veteran that I worked with a while back who had such anger issues that his wife couldn't be in the same room with him. So he would just go out to his garage and spend all day kind of tinkering around with this old Corvette that he had. And he'd get pissed off, and tools would be flying, and, swear words and everything. And nobody wanted to be around him. And he started using cannabis, and it mellowed him out to the point where he could start having a relationship with his wife again, and was tolerable to be around. And that was somebody that was dealing with severe PTSD. So I've seen, and again, one example is not evidence to support doing it in every case, but I've seen both sides of it where, sometimes it works out well and sometimes it works out not so well.
Yeah, but let me understand you. But so even though you're not all in on the thing, you're into a point where you're considering, right? Like, you consider that this could work for some people.
Cannabis, for sure, I've seen work for some people. The psychedelics and stuff like that, I don't know enough about it to really say that.
Is it hard to be a doctor in these cases? Because you have all this, all this research and all this stuff, but then, there's you can't ignore what's happening out there either. And Chad's a great example of what is possible through some of these things. Is that a weird seat to be in?
Yeah, it is. It is. I can tell you another anecdote. A gentleman that I worked with that had really severe PTSD, that went on a vision quest. He was Native American, and he did a sweat and a vision quest, and was on peyote, and it fixed his PTSD. He came back, and I asked him about it. He's like, "No, I'm good." Whoa, hold on a second. We were just dealing with a chronic condition. You were suspicious all the time. You were up all night, worrying that somebody was going to break into your house, pacing, checking everything. What do you mean you're okay? And he's like, no, that's in the past now. I was able to close that chapter by going through the ceremony, and the peyote helped, and I'm good now. Okay.
Okay. Right. Well, and it's important to say, even for you, Chad, that wasn't the first door that you knocked down. Obviously, no. I don't think anybody's insinuating that you're struggling, go start taking whatever you want here. But, it's usually after a series of things have been exhausted and you're still not able to find that thing. Isn't that how you feel about it, Chad?
Yeah, and that's why I guess I'm open-minded about everything. Before I was very closed off. I didn't realize there was another way to go about mental health. I went through, I've been on some kind of SSRI for the last 24 years. Mainly right after I got out of the military, I was on SSRIs. So you do that, and you have a certain way of thinking, and that way of thinking sticks around for a long time. And then you realize this isn't normal, because you start opening up, or you talk to other people, and they're like, you talk about thought process, and they kind of like, Jesus Christ, dude, you worry about this, this, and this, and you're concerned about this. And then you realize it's not a normal way to think. So then you start doing some research on your own, like there's got to be a different way. And then you find out, some of the stats behind SSRIs, and, 1 in 3, work, it's roughly, and then there's your placebo effect and everything of that nature. But then for me to just go in, when I did ketamine, it was probably the 7th ketamine session that things really kind of took off for me and really started to understand and slow down. And it just opened my thought process to different, modalities and ways of thinking and approaching, mental health as a whole. So for me, it saved my life. So it's like, hey, I did the traditional shit for 20 years. It helped, but it didn't, I couldn't get past the finish line. Now I feel like I'm closer to the goal line of being a normal life, or not having those rushed thoughts, if that makes sense.
Not cool. And that's for me, like, that's the win for me, is that we just, I don't care if everybody loves it. I'm not trying to win everybody over. I'm in a position of saying to people, it might work. So if they've tried other things and they haven't, why shouldn't we let them? We should give them this option. They should have the ability to choose this for themselves. We have a comment up here, which is our opinions and knowledge of TMS. And I only know that through Dr. Sarna, who's kind of the TMS guru, as far as I know. What do you know about it? And have you heard about it before, Chad?
I have not heard about TMS.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And let's dive into it a little bit, Dave.
Yeah. So what TMS is a magnet that induces a small electrical current underneath the skull in the brain. And so you're basically doing what electroconvulsive therapy would be, but with it's milder, and you're not getting a seizure out of it. You're just inducing a current in a specific part of the brain that helps to reset things when it comes to depression and anxiety. It kind of depends on what part of the brain that you're involving with it. And it works well. It works about as well as antidepressant medication. So some people, get a robust response to it. Some people not so much. Side effects are very minimal. So you might have a little irritation around the skin. There's a very rare chance of having a seizure. I don't think I've ever talked to anybody that's actually had that happen to them. The main drawback is it's expensive. So you're committing to several times a week for several weeks, and I think in the community it's a couple $100 a treatment. So it can add up pretty quickly to go through that. And if you're going to do that, you'd kind of like a little bit more, something closer to 100% guarantee, but there's no such guarantee.
I had TMS as something different. I think there must be maybe there's a couple of different things out there. Dr. Sarno, the guy that I was referencing, he has this whole thing on TMS, or maybe it's TSM. Maybe I have that backwards, but at any rate, his whole assertion, is that our emotions become our pains and our aches and all of these things. And, you don't really have a bad back. You have a bad relationship. So I thought that was the road that we're going to jump on, but I had never heard about the electric currents before. So how does that even work, Dave? Like when I come in and I lay down on the table and like they put a skull cap on me, or
the actual process of it.
Yeah.
So you sit in something that's like a dental chair.
Okay.
And there's all different settings to support your head and neck. And the first time you go in, they take a bunch of measurements to figure out exactly where the magnet's going to go. And then when you come back for your next treatment, all the settings are already on a piece of paper or in the computer. And then they just set the chair to your settings and get going with the treatment.
It's interesting. It's almost got a Reiki vibe to it.
Yeah. So TMS stands for transcranial magnetic stimulation. So that's the TMS that I'm thinking of.
But I'm still fascinated by it. I went to, once upon a time, I had this guy, this was back when I used to have my radio show, and he was coming to the market with this, he built it as like the same technology that all of the people in the NFL are using. They're all wearing these skull caps and they're going through these things that are doing stuff to their brain that's allowing them to focus hardcore and to really, do things that they couldn't do. And it was cool I did it for a few times, and I do believe that there was some benefit there. And I think if there's a question I have for you, Dave, it's like, you were somebody who worked in a circuit for a long time where there was a specific way of doing things. Is there anything that you think the psychologists and the psychiatrists are underutilizing? Yeah.
Yeah. I think of the alternative treatments, meditation, mindfulness, and yoga can be added to anything that I have to offer. And especially when we're talking about dealing with the PTSD realm, doing other things other than just going for therapy and taking medications, other things to help you manage anxiety. And specifically about yoga and meditation, if you're practicing meditation and you're learning how to quiet your mind, those skills and that exercise that you develop when you start having intrusive thoughts, or you get a thing stuck in your head that you want to not think about, you now have the skills to be able to push that aside and move forward with things. So I think that's probably one of the most underutilized add-ons that we have. And again, it's not going to interfere with anything that a therapist is going to be throwing at you.
Yeah, it's interesting to me that because you wonder, I mean, you've been a doctor for a lot of your adult life, and there, I'm sure, is like anything. It's like, well, there's about 10 things that I get to do all the time. There's like 5 things that I get to do some of the time. There's like a couple of things that I get to do every now and again, and I just wondered, what are those things as you see them when people come into the room and you get to reach into a new bag of tricks? Because people need to develop just like you. They need to figure out what tool to grab out of that toolbox, don't they?
Yeah. It's interesting. There's a whole process, so when we were talking about some of the alternative treatments and psychedelics and stuff like that, I think it's easier to think of it like as a funnel, right? So you do an assessment, you figure out what it is that you're dealing with, or at least as best as you can for the amount of time that you spent. Sometimes you have to revise things as you get additional information, but so you make your best guess as to where you are and what you're dealing with. And then there are common treatments that you go to, and everybody kind of has their favorites for various reasons. My approach is to look at secondary issues and try to find, if we're talking about medication, try to find a medication that fits what other secondary issues there are. So if it's,
what do you mean by secondary? What does that mean?
Yeah. So if you're depressed, well, depressed is depressed, right? But some people have kind of an agitated depression, and they're up at night, they can't sleep, and they're fretting about things. So then you want to go with something that has side effects that are more calming. Where if you have somebody that's just very slowed down, no motivation, they can't get out of their own way, you might want to go with an antidepressant that has side effects that are a little bit more stimulating or invigorating. So you can pick a medication kind of, so what it is that you're treating primarily, but then you can kind of pick something else based on what other smaller issues are there, but without having to add a second medication to it.
What I've always been fascinated by, and you could help me kind of clean up a little bit, is that when you start taking medications like that, and then there's that moment where you decide maybe I want to come off it, or I want to stop taking it, or some people just decide, I'm better, I'm feeling better, I'm done. And then oftentimes it can cause people to almost relapse, and it can make things even worse. What's happening up there, man, that's making that go all haywire? Is it just the fact that it's not getting that chemical anymore to stay on track? Or can you kind of explain that to a third grader? Yeah.
Right, so if you're talking about an antidepressant in particular, there's 2 different parts to that. So the one thing is, if you stop an antidepressant medication abruptly, you will have a bit of a rebound effect, right? So if we're talking about an SSRI specifically, you're boosting serotonin with the medication. So if you stop it all at once, that it's going to rebound back and you're going to get side effects from it. So as a general rule, you want to taper off a medication. But then the other part of it is these medications take about a month to work. So, when you first start taking an antidepressant, it doesn't work overnight. It takes about 3 to 4 weeks to kick in, sometimes longer. And when it wears off, it takes about 3 to 4 weeks to wear off. So I've seen plenty of situations where people have felt, well, I've been on this medication for so long, my mood is pretty consistently good. I'd like to stop taking it. Okay, so we can make a plan to take it off gradually, maybe reduce it over a week or two, and then they're still doing fine. And then a month later, then it's, well, I'm kind of losing interest in things again. My anxiety is coming back again, right? So that's when you'd know, okay, this person probably still needs to be on the medication because they're trying without it. And a month is a good enough period of time to say, okay, if you're doing okay after a month, we'll cautiously watch and see how things are going. But if you slip into a low that quickly, that's not good.
Yeah. I had this conversation earlier this morning with somebody. We were actually talking about the pills and all of the things. And I wondered, from your standpoint, there's clearly got to be times where there's no pill that's going to fix this. There's no pill that I can give you that's going to make this right. What you need is somewhat of a spiritual intervention, or you need, some other kind of an intervention here. Does that make sense to you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, this is a frustration that I've had even with my own profession. There was a period of time, probably mostly like in the 90s, where the thought was depression is a chemical imbalance. Okay, fine, it's a chemical imbalance, but that's not all that it is, right? So there is something biochemically that's going on, but there's no way that you're going to just tweak the chemicals and that's all you need to do and everything will be right with the world. It's much more complex than that, right? So that was kind of a reaction to the previous more Freudian way of looking at things, that everything is related to your relationship with your parents. Okay, well, there's probably more to it than just that. There probably is a biological component to it, right? So, you see these pendulum swings over time where things kind of go to one extreme or the other. And I think where I fit right now, because I've kind of lived through both swings of the pendulum, is it's all of the above, right? So there are influences from childhood that kind of affect how you want to engage in things. Whether if you've had traumatic experiences before, you're going to be more hesitant to get involved with things, maybe certain things that there's an avoidance to. There may be a biological component, right? Anxiety runs in the family, and my mom was a worrier, my grandmother was a worrier. Okay, so you're probably a worrier. That there's probably a component to it that you inherited, right? And so all that means is when you're faced with something new, instead of rushing toward it with curiosity, you're going to hold back and be hesitant and concerned about it, right? That's the biological part that you inherited. With all of this stuff, you can overcome it if you see the patterns. So if you know that you're biologically a nervous person, you can do things to challenge yourself and try to overcome it. Just like if you have a speech impediment, you can practice public speaking and through repetition be able to overcome it. I think John Stossel was a stutterer, and he went on to have a career in journalism. So, through hard work, you can overcome certain things. But the anxiety is always going to be there, right? If you're an anxious person, you're not going to not be anxious. You'll be anxious, but you'll push through it. You'll figure out how to push through it.
And you'll have your tools that you reach into, and that's where it is. Yeah, it was a good talk this morning, and I'm glad it's leading into some good discussion this afternoon, because if there's anything that we could impress upon people who are in their 20s and 30s, it's start working on your toolbox right now. Start figuring out what tools are available to you that you have access to, that make sense for your life, that makes sense for the support people in your life, and start putting those in your craftsman toolbox right now. And visualize it like this, right? Just to visualize the way you would go out and grab a hammer to hang something on the wall. When you're pissed off and your kids light you up, or your wife pisses you off, or some of that stuff happens, you go and grab the toolbox, which is, I need to go meditate for 10 minutes, or, I need to go for a walk for 10 minutes or something like that. And that would be the message to my younger self, right? Would be start getting your toolbox ready now.
Yeah.
Don't wait until you're there.
And the thing is about people in their 20s, you're not that far out of adolescence, right? So whatever conflict that you had with your parents, it's all still pretty fresh, and you're still learning how to make adult decisions, and you're still making mistakes and trying different things, and some of it works, some of it doesn't. Probably the best thing that you can do, though, is keep an openness to the possibility that maybe you learned things wrong, or that maybe there's still some work to be done. Because if you, and again, this is coming out of an adolescent mindset, I can tell you, dealing with my teenage kids, they know it all already. There's nothing that you can tell them that they don't already know. Okay, well, I've lived a little bit longer than you, so I think I have picked up a little bit more wisdom, and kind of bringing it into the fatherhood role. Since that was, I think, where we kind of started off, where we're going to go, is finding a balance between letting your kids make some decisions, potentially make some mistakes, trying to guide them in a way. But if you overplay your hand and force it, then they're going to tend to track the opposite direction, which is probably what you don't want.
Yeah, it becomes clear to me, and welcome back, Chad. It becomes clear to me that, if you are a soldier and you're went and had your experiences and you're locked in that fight or flight, right? You're still in that space, PTSD and all the things are very much in your life, and mood swings and all the other things. When your kids mess up, I think there could be a tendency there for that person in that fight or flight frame of mind to act like it's the end of the world.
Right.
Everything's life and death, right? And it's like, no. She's just 5 years old and she got too close to the pool. She was going to be okay.
Right.
And convincing folks that maybe they're being hard on their children for their own stuff, and it might not actually have anything to do with them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's just such a thing. I mean, I know I was, right? I don't know about you, Chad, but when I was like not in my good moments, I was not a good dad.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's still pretty fresh, but I've had my moments. Like I said, my oldest son, he's Connor, he's 5. But there are times that I went from fight or flight pretty quick on certain things, and I had to reel myself in and say, hey, hit the pause button. Before I would have kind of walked something like that completely off, but it's an immediate, get to their level. I'm eye to eye and have an apology with them immediately. Mm-hmm. Like, hey, dad overstepped. I've had a bad day. Like I'm really anxious. They don't understand that, but they get it, and so that's where I try to come from at that angle is let me find a way to explain this. And so they don't have that memory of, God damn, dad was a dick, So that fight,
because they're going to have plenty of those moments. Let's be honest. There's going to be plenty of those moments.
Right.
It's kind of our job sometimes.
Right. And sometimes you just have to, lay down the law.
Yeah.
And there's going to be protests and a lot of unhappy campers, but that's how it has to be.
It is. And, when I was in my retreat, I think there's a prayer. It's called like the Ho'oponopono. It's a Native American thing, I believe, where it says, I'm sorry. Please forgive me. I love you. And that's it. That's the simplicity of it. When you're having to go put your tail between your legs and apologize to your wife and your kids is, I'm sorry, please forgive me. I love you. And that really is all that needs to be said, because it's really what you feel inside, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
No, 100%. I think sometimes we overcomplicate things.
We totally do, man.
Say, my bad. Next chapter, please.
Oh, man. All right. Well, as we wind down in today's discussion, we've just come off Father's Day, and it's a day that, I always said to the folks that follow me on my channel, I said, it's always a double-edged sword for me on this day. It's the day that reminds me that my dad isn't here anymore. And it's the day that reminds me why I need to be the best version of myself for my kids. And so it always is almost a little rejuvenating to go through Father's Day and come out the other side and be like, all right, let's lean into that part now. Let's lean into not freaking out all the time on all the things. And then, but there's another side of this, Dave, that I'd love your opinion on, which is, and I can only speak from my own experience. So there, one of the generational cycles that I'm trying to break with my kids is abuse, right? Hitting them when they do something wrong. And sometimes you get yourself in a position where you're angry, they've done something to upset you, and your almost primal reaction is there, but you're trying to avoid it. And so now you're actually in a space where you're doing nothing because you're afraid if you do something, it's going to be too much. Mm-hmm. That makes some sense to you? Mm-hmm. Yeah. What is that? I mean, and how can we navigate those waters? For $1 million, how can we navigate those waters?
Don't discipline in anger.
Yeah.
I think that's a good rule of thumb. Don't discipline in anger. So if you have to step out of the space because you're feeling enraged, take a pause and come back and address the situation a little later, half hour later. Enough time to cool things down a bit. Because I can certainly think at times when my kids made me see red.
Mm-hmm. It's their job.
Well, I think too, it's knowing your other teammate, right? Your partner, your spouse, mm-hmm. and being able to read that body language. We've got it pretty much dialed in here at the McLean household. If I'm at that 9 or 10, I can take a look at the wife and be like, "Tag, you're it. You need to handle this while I go walk." Or same thing. She's had her times where, slammed a door and I said, "Hey, just go breathe. It's all good. I got him. Go do your thing." So I think it's good to know, like you said, a spouse, partner, teammate, whatever you want to call that other person, your best friend, and just say, "Hey, like, we got this together. Go get your 20 minutes and come back when you're right."
I really like that a lot. We used to do a lot of the same thing, except we would use the word energy. I'd be like, "Babe, the kids need a different energy right now. It's not me. They don't need what I'm bringing to the table. They need something different right here."
Yeah.
What's since I fell off, since we're out here in Palm Springs and our internet drops off, out here in Peoria. What was on the TMS? I didn't understand what TMS was, I guess abbreviation was, but there was a small period I actually did some of that TMS with a gentleman in North Phoenix. I guess, I didn't do it too long because I didn't see a whole lot of benefit. I don't know if it was the true, TMS, but one of the questions I want to ask you, Matthew, is what are your feelings or thoughts on, I know you're open to all sorts of modalities, but as you learn more about maybe the ketamine or the psychedelics, and do you have friends that you have known that have gone through that, minus myself, and what was your first, like, whoa, when they told you that they were using these types of drugs to facilitate that?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? So I have a little bit of a storied history with regard to it. I had an acid trip in my early 20s. So that gave me a real firsthand experience to the whole thing and what it's about and what it does. And I had a couple of shroom trips along the way too in my early 20s. And so I dabbled in the space, not a ton, but just a little bit, enough to know what it's about. And really, my opinion on it hasn't shifted much over the last 20 years, which is to say, if it works for you, then I think you should have access to it.
Right.
And if this is going to be something that really unlocks you and you're drawn towards it, I think go for it. And, the truth of the matter is that some of these plant medicines and the history, or some of the stuff that we're learning now, like, they really do have this unique ability to open portals for people. And like this guy that you were talking about, Dave, earlier, it's like, no, I'm good now. I fixed it. Like he must have, that drug it did something where he walked through some door and he's not in there anymore. And so the downside of that, of course, I'm not a doctor, but the downside of it is not everybody's going to have that experience. And then let me say this, as a guy who's done some of those drugs before, there's a lot of people that shouldn't go within 1,000,000 miles of psychedelics because they're not ready for it. They do not have the equipment to handle what's coming because it is a trip, dude. That's the reason they call it that.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not going on a walk in the park. You are going on a mega self-discovery dive here. And there is no guarantee on where you're coming out, and I think that's probably what spooks doctors a little bit, is that you can't guarantee the end point on this. And so, I get it. But I think that's my opinion, Chad, is that if it's going to work for you, then you should try it. And if you see some success by it, then that's awesome.
Right.
But it can't be the first thing we reach for.
No,
right.
gotcha.
But going forward, it would make a lot more sense if it's going to be used to have it used in a controlled setting with the proper safeguards in place so that people don't overdo it, freak out, do something harmful when they're under the influence. Right. So using it in a controlled setting makes the most sense to me.
It does.
Yeah. And I think you're seeing that a lot. And that's what I love to see too, Dr. Dave, is it is in controlled settings. You do have I think they call them psychonauts therapist, right? That is there, that has gone through these to facilitate that stuff. Yeah. By no means do I want people going and grabbing, 2-3 grams of mushrooms and heading out to the forest and tripping and seeing what they can figure out on their own, so it's super interesting to watch this space kind of grow.
Yeah. Well, listen, like I said, whatever works for you. We're all just walking each other home, and however I can help you get there, that's what I'm interested in.
Vespa,
that's what I'm interested in. Vespa, yeah, right. All right, what's on the plan for you the rest of the week here, Dr. Dave? You got any big plans? You going four-wheeling?
Not in the immediate future. I'd like to maybe go sometime in the next couple of weeks, waiting for the family to get back from their trip.
They got to come back and celebrate their dad.
The problem is we have 4 dogs, so somebody's got to stay behind with the dogs, at least for right now.
Yeah. What about you, Chad? Any big plans this week?
No big plans this week. Like I said, I've got to get a bunch of orders out, so I'll be doing that pretty much all day Saturday after the little guy plays his basketball, and then we're just gonna kind of chill. We're heading up to Park City in about a week and a half, so we're gonna go up there for a full week, just over the 4th of July, and for that entire week. So we're looking forward to that. To, as you guys well know, get out of this damn heat that we already have. So
it's out of control. Yeah, I know. We're going to miss each other. I'll be in Utah. I fly up there tomorrow. But speaking at a conference on Saturday night, so I'm excited about that.
Yeah, I'm interested. I want to hear more about that. I've actually kind of dove into their conferences and read some of that stuff. Pretty interesting stuff.
They bring a lot of people to the party. You know what I mean? She bills it as this the world's largest energy healing conference, or the world's largest attended or in-person conference. And yeah, I mean, she's got, my God, it must be 30, 50, 60, 150 different people there, and they're all bringing their own unique craft and specialty to the table. Yeah, I expect it to be a completely weirded out experience in the best way possible. I can't wait to get in. Those are my people, man. Those are my people with the charging the crystals and getting out the new light and the new moon. I'm like, come on.
When are you doing that, Matt? Is it this weekend or next week?
Saturday night, 7:00.
Okay, very cool.
It'll be fun. All right, guys. Well, listen, nice visiting with you again, and we'll check in with everybody a week from today. If anybody has any objections to me hanging up, say I now, or I'm hanging up. Peace and love, everybody. Thanks for watching.
Everyone.